Today, we're privileged to host a conversation between two courageous voices for justice in our church and long-term friends of Root and Branch, Selene Ambert and Dr. Mary McAleese. Root and Branch was born, as I'm sure you know, from a vision for a church where there are no gender restrictions placed on roles in ministry or leadership, none. One that is inclusive, welcoming, and affirming. And today's gathering embodies that mission, bringing together two powerful voices who've spent decades challenging institutional barriers. The discussion will centre on Selene's landmark memoir, A Divine Calling, in which she shares her decades-long journey of discerning a vocation to the Catholic priesthood, a path that she's steadily pursued despite the official closed door on women's ordination. And the conversation between Selene and Mary, who contributed the book's powerful foreword and is herself a leading advocate for institutional reform, and later with your voices, will no doubt take us to some of the central themes of our movement: faith, courage, and prophetic persistence. And then Selene and Mary will take your questions and respond to your observations. As many of you know, for Root and Branch, spirituality is aligned with openness, with listening, and with questioning. Now, the event is going to be recorded and will later be available on our website. Please, folks, remember that the chat is visible to everyone, but do take part and dip into it when you can. It's always very lively, and that anyone could save it. So, once again, welcome, and over to Sue for our time of silence and prayer before our speakers are introduced. Sue.
Thank you, Rihanna. I'd like to invite everyone to have a moment's silence, possibly a minute, to bring in the Spirit before we proceed with this very important discussion. Holy One, you who are creator of all, who made humanity in your image, Saviour of all, who call women and men to witness your ministry, death, and resurrection, Inspirer of all who seek and serve. We thank you for the women you have blessed with your call to celebrate the Eucharist, to minister alongside their brothers in a renewed Roman Catholic Church. We pray that the Church will soon welcome and nourish to the full the gifts of women as priests, prophets, and leaders, knowing, as Mary of Nazareth knew, that with you all things are possible. Amen. And now I'll hand over to those who are introducing. Mary and Rhiannon. Thank you.
Actually, it's Rhiannon first who is introducing Selene. Rhiannon?
I'm here. Right. Selene Humbert, also known as Selene Vatinal, I am so pleased to be able to introduce you to our friends here today. Selene is a French-Irish woman living in Ireland. I've been going to say she probably doesn't need any introduction, but I will introduce you nevertheless. She's an ecumenical theology graduate, and she's been ministering as a spiritual director for 20 years and is a significant figure in the movement for gender equality within the Catholic Church. Selene is married to Colm Holmes, who I'm sure you all know, chairperson of We Are Church International. She co-founded Brothers and Sisters in Christ in 1993. The group's mission was to open all church ministries to women through prayer, seminars, and public petitions. And in 2001, she was a driving force behind the landmark first Women's Ordination Worldwide International Conference in Dublin. Wow. And wow goes incidentally from strength to strength. In 2025, so much more recently, Selene published her spiritual memoir, which is the focus of our meeting, A Divine Calling, one woman's lifelong battle for equality in the Catholic Church. And in this, she tells the story of her call to the presbyterial ministry and the response from the authorities. It's a cracking good book. Amongst the speakers at the PAC book launch, which took place at Selene's alma mater, Trinity College Dublin, in October last year, was Ursula Halligan, the Irish journalist, broadcaster and theologian. And she, Ursula, cited Thomas Halleck, a prominent Czech theologian and priest, who argues that faith is not a set of easy answers, but a call to dwell in the uncertainty and impossibility of the world. Selene, thank you. Despite all the provocations that you've encountered with grace and courage on your journey, for being a steadfast testament to that very logic of the impossible, and for never disbelieving that change is possible. In her foreword to Selene's book, Mary McAleese cites the late great Seamus Heaney. The one among us who never swerved from all her instincts, told her was right action, who stood her ground in the indicative, whose boat will lift when the cloudburst happens. And thank you, Selene, for standing your ground then and now and into the future. And welcome. And now over to Mary to introduce Dr. McAleese.
Thank you so much, Rhiannon. It is indeed my very great pleasure to welcome Dr. Mary McAleese, who, as I believe everyone will know, was President of Ireland from 1997 until 2011. She was the first president to come from Northern Ireland, where she and her family experienced firsthand the sectarian violence of the Troubles. The theme of her presidency was building bridges, and her work for peace and reconciliation culminated in the historic state visit to Ireland by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in May 2011. Mary is a broadcaster, academic lawyer, and has a licentiate and doctorate in canon law from the Pontifical Gregorian University. She was formerly Reed Professor of Criminal Law, Criminology and Penology in Trinity College, Director of the Institute of Professional Legal Studies at Queen's University Belfast, the first female Provost Vice-Chancellor at Queen's, and Professor of Children, Law and Religion at the University of Glasgow. She is currently Chancellor of Trinity College Dublin. I wish we had time to enumerate all her other chairs, her books, her prizes, her honorary doctorates, but we must rush on. She was a founder member of Ireland's campaign for homosexual law reform and played a significant role in the successful 2015 same-sex marriage referendum campaign. She has been a leading critic of Catholic Church teaching on, amongst other things, women, homosexuality, church members' human rights, children's rights, corporal punishment, church governance, and episcopal accountability. With such demands upon her time, we thank her enormously for being such a good friend to Root and Branch, for her encouragement, her support, and for being such fun. Her warmth, her wit, her wisdom endear her to us. Let's make the very most of her being here tonight with our wonderful, courageous Selene and all of us. Selene, Mary, welcome to Root and Branch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and a big welcome to everybody. It was wonderful to see all those names coming in and where they're coming from. I think we've pretty much circled the globe, and that's lovely to know because we're talking about a universal church and the rules of a universal church, which has 600 million female members. But those female members, as many of us are only too well aware, their giftedness, their goodness, their relationship to God, their spirituality, their desire to serve in every way possible, these are stymied in so many ways, none more profoundly than the exclusion of women from the ordained diaconate and priesthood. And for someone like Selene, who from our earliest days as friends, Selene, we go back many decades. We were very young women when we first had this conversation. Now we're grannies and we're still having it and nothing has changed. But what's been wonderful, Selene, is your fidelity to your deep sense that God has called you to this vocation. I look at other people who've just walked away and said, "Oh, a plague on your house. Why bother? You're, to the magisterium. You're ruining Christ's credibility. We'll find our spiritual lives elsewhere." I look at other women who have actually been ordained. Some have joined the churches like the Anglican Communion, which will ordain women, and some have maintained their Catholicity while at the same time inviting excommunication by being ordained. So, but you have done something really unique. You have stated your certainty about this calling. You've prayed about it. You've worked on it. You've explored it. And in this wonderful book, A Divine Calling, you have narrated it and made it available to us. And that's the first thing I want to do, is to thank you for that fidelity. Because God knows you have been provoked and frustrated at every turn. And so I want to start off by saying, first of all, how much I admire you. Oh, Lord. Selene and I say, we go back, we were very young looking, good looking women back in those days. And here we are. We're two fine looking grannies now, right? We're still two fine looking grannies. I mean, I have my bus pass for the last 10 years. And I had hoped way back when we first had these discussions, Selene, yes, life seemed more full of hope in this regard. I mean, we had Pope John the 23rd had said that the Day of Women had come and had to be fulfilled. We had Pope Paul VI had the investigation into him. We never heard any more about that. We had the Second Vatican Council. Some of the documents seemed to indicate that the world was opening up to women in the church in a new way. And also lots of other things were happening. Free second level education, massification of third level education, women flooding into to become, as Seamus Heaney, to quote him again, became intelligence as brightened and unmannerly as crowbars. And God knows we've had to be. And so I look at where we're at now. Here we are in a new millennium, a new century, and things are just not looking as good as perhaps they did back then. But yet you remain so optimistic and so passionate. And I just want to remind our audience of what Pope Francis said about what we are doing right now. What we are doing right now, openly discussing the issue of female ordination and the consequences of exclusion, and exploring the reality that there are women like Selene who feel deeply, deeply that call from God to serve and to serve fully. But here's what he said. July 2023, I nearly had a heart attack over this, as Selene knows. The theological basis on which the ban sits lacks a clear and authoritative doctrine which has not yet been fully developed. You think? That's me. It is not, he said, a dogmatic definition. But here's the thing. He says it must, listen to this language, it must be adhered to by all. No one can publicly contradict it, and yet it can be a subject of study. So actually the Pope is saying what we are doing right here, right now, publicly daring to contradict it, or certainly to challenge it, that's not allowed. Imagine, in a world where God gave us conscience, freedom of conscience and expression and belief, and a Pope tells us, no, it must be adhered to, even though he can't offer any substance, any rational substance to its existence. And then, worse than that, just less than a year later, he said in an interview on CNN, obviously, where all magisterial decisions are promulgated, he said that absent a study, and he said he had, in the meantime, there hadn't been this study he talked about. He actually emphatically ruled out there ever being ordination of women to the diaconate and priesthood. And then, of course, we've had this Cardinal Petrucci's commission in December, and we're going to explore those. You will get a word in a minute, Selene, I promise. But I just want to set the scene, and then you're going to take us through it in much more rational and refined and dignified way than me, because I just call all this stuff codology dressed up as theology. I simply won't even dignify it with academic study. But he, in that commission report, which ruled out ordination to the diaconate, but left it open to future discernment and study, oh joy, oh bliss, and then said that within the group of those on that commission, there were a significant number who believed that if we had women priests, and this is really extraordinary, the language is extraordinary. The language said that if there were to be women priests, it would rupture the nuptial meaning of salvation. Rupture. Think about that. We've always been told that baptism is necessary for salvation, but now we're told that not just baptism, but a male priesthood, an exclusively male priesthood, is essential for salvation. Seriously. I mean, I'm surprised you're still here, Selene, and still battling. But you are, and you're wonderful. So tell us where all this started. Take us through this wonderful memoir.
Well, thank you, Mary. And as you were speaking and remembering a long time ago when we were young and hopeful, all I was thinking was a banner we had in 1995, first day of prayer for women's ordination outside the GPO, the site of the Rising. And the banner said, "Imagine women priests in the Catholic Church by the year 2000.
God help our wit.
So yes, well, Groundhog Day, it just
Exactly.
goes on and on. I'm afraid, yes, the Petrocchi Commission, well, I just said more of the same, except it exposes even more clearly the appalling theology. So that's one merit, really. I think people now see, yes, I suppose I was going to say the deep roots of the exclusion, the misogyny, really, and how maleness is really, I'm afraid, considered divine, more divine. But you are saying and marveling how I'm still here. Well, I do marvel. I have to say, there are plenty of days I said, I can't believe it. I'm still at it. And writing the memoir, going back to the very early days, to birth, and obviously all those years, and yes, there was a sense, why am I still? But what came very, very clear to me is it's really the calling has not let me go.
Wow.
So I have to say, you praise my fidelity and thank you, but I can tell you, there were many days I just said, goodbye, I'm gone. I can do other things with my time, with my energy. There are plenty of but each time somebody just said, no, stay on. I'm with you. Continue. We'll continue together. So I think it's God's fidelity. I think it's God's fidelity to women. And I think if God calls women, God is faithful to us women. And that's the promise and the strength on which I draw. It's on the strength and the promise of the one who has called me and who accompanies me through thick and thin. So that's the first thing to say, is that there is one who is faithful and very much faithful to us women and who doesn't see any difference. And when I hear, as you are quoting, the Pope saying that nobody is allowed to contradict, that statement, I said, in my very being, in my call, I am a sign of contradiction to that statement.
Correct.
It's in my very being. And if I speak when I'm not allowed, when I should not, to obey the rules, I would be denying very profoundly who I am as a baptized woman who has answered a call. Behind it all, there is a call. It's not an ideology. Sometimes I think some of the bishops thought that I just decided I'm going to break down this patriarchal institution. No, as I've said to them, I was first deeply disturbed. I was a young woman in Trinity College. You were probably a professor then, and a young professor as well. But I was a young student, and it came to me, and I was not looking for that calling. It was the last thing. And it turned my life upside down. And as I've mentioned in the book, it was a profound crisis and a matter of life and death. I genuinely didn't know how I could go on living.
It was that powerful?
It was. It was so powerful. I had been so conditioned. Conditioned is a word. I was a good Roman Catholic girl. My mother was a catechist. I had never questioned the idea that God called men to the priesthood. Women could get called perhaps to the religious life. I had never questioned it. And then that calling came soon after a profound religious experience. But when that calling came, I really actually questioned my gender. Now, I've had no issues of gender. You know, we know transgender people, that's a separate issue. That wasn't it. How could I reconcile hearing so strongly and so clearly a call which had been assured and believed could only be heard by a man? And I remember as a young 18-year-old saying to myself, am I a man? No, I am a girl, I know. So why do I hear that calling? And look, this is much more than 50 years later, and that calling has never let me go. But that was where it was profoundly disturbing. And of course, as I've mentioned in the book and I'd mentioned before, I had a complete breakdown, you know, and I had to have psychiatric treatment, very good. The psychiatrist realized that there was something, and he said to me, well, you're talking to the chaplains. Well, stay with the chaplains. But it was a matter of life and death. And I said, how, if that is closed, because I realized then it was closed, how will I live with it?
Tell me when you first articulated it, when you put words on it out loud, to whom?
The chaplains. There were two chaplains, Roman Catholic chaplains.
In Trinity.
In Trinity.
Yes, good friends.
Yes, Brendan Heffernan and Eamon McCarthy. Brendan has died, but Eamon McCarthy still very much alive. Also not so, he was a young chaplain. We were all young.
We were all young then.
He was a very young chaplain, so that was way above his head as well.
Brendan, of course, was the first. He was the first Catholic chaplain in Trinity College.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, he had just arrived the year before I did. Yeah, and we had the amazing thing of, you know, a university 400 years old that was essentially a Protestant establishment organization then, but no longer is, was opening itself up to, first of all, not just to Catholic students because they had been coming in anyway, but to Catholic worship in the chapel.
That's right.
And so we used to have the mass there at 1:05.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful feeling because, like, we're talking about the 70s, so the era immediately after Vatican II, when everything seemed possible, and also seemed possible for women, because they were, I mean, I remember as a law student, when I would become a law student, out of a class of, say, 60, there were 10 women. Now, if you'd be lucky to find a male person in a law school. Yes. Actually, it's not as bad as that. But I mean, the thing has completely flipped now. We have huge numbers of women in university all over the place and doing phenomenal work. And they're everywhere they didn't used to be, you know, except the priesthood. So you went and you talked to Brendan and Eamon. And I mean, these are two exceptional priests, incidentally. They wouldn't be normative, I don't think.
No, they were very, very open and very pastoral minded. And I have to say, to this day, I'm very grateful to both of them. And to the people and my fellow students as well, because the chaplaincy was kind of a home.
Yes.
Especially for those of us who are far from home. having come from France for myself. But you see, this was 20 years before girls, women could serve at the altar.
Correct.
The Vatican only allowed, officially, and very kind of reluctantly and miserly, if you must have them, kind of, well, you can have altar girls. That was only allowed in 94. I'm talking having a sense of calling to the priesthood, to the presbyteral ministry, 20 years before we could officially even just serve as an altar girl. Now, I have to say, as you mentioned, the Mass, you know, the daily Mass in Trinity, I would have attended there. And those of us students, including female students, were allowed by the chaplains, by Brendan and Eamon, to serve. But some days we were told, no, not today. And we knew why, because somebody, an important cleric was coming. And therefore, we couldn't be seen. So, you know, apartheid, sexism, that's what it is.
Oh, Paul, you're right. I mean, name it for sure.
Yes. And I have to say, I would have been very aware. I would have grown up with an awareness about racism and apartheid. But I had been blind to it within the church until it hit me straight on. And the barrier came up. You're only a girl, and there are different rules for girls. And you're invisible, and you're only there when it's okay and don't disturb. Otherwise, you have to disappear. And the realization of that deep apartheid, injustice, discrimination, sexism hit me as a young girl at 18. And it is an awful realization.
And then
that your spiritual home is like that. It is an awful, I have to say that was awful.
I mean, you're talking about a realization that something that was your deepest, deepest desire, and not only a desire, but a certainty that this was what God wanted from you, that the doors were closed. I'm thinking of what Jerry O'Hanlon said way back in 1995 when he managed to steer Decree 14 through the then Jesuit 34th General Congregation. And he said very powerful words. He said, "We have often contributed to a form of clericalism which has reinforced male domination," and here's the rub, "with an ostensibly divine sanction." So you're talking to two open priests, as Brendan and Eamon were. But outside of that, you must have been encountering people who were saying, but it's not God's wish. I mean, it's not God. You can't be listening to God. This has to be a false voice in your head because God has sanctioned only men. And so that's been the big rub always, hasn't it?
To
the big problem.
To this day, and to this day, Mary, and what I've reflected obviously a lot about it. I've had time to reflect about it. And what it does is that it would alienate yourself from the divine within you. Because if you're told, this is a delusion, don't pay any attention to it, you know, then you become alienated. You cannot no longer trust within, you know, yourself. It introduces a separation. And when I was back all those years in college, I had a very anguished prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, which was brought into the chapel, into, you know, the oratory. And I would pray over and over again, do not call me. Your church doesn't want me.
Wow. Did you say that in prayer? Wow.
Sorry, I did.
You did?
I did.
Oh, good God. And here you are. You were, you know, you were what? You were still a teenager then, you know?
Yes.
You know, and here you are. And do you still feel that?
No.
No, thank God.
But the pain is because there are still women who are being told to suppress that calling within them, to disown the voice of God within them.
Have you been accused of it being fake and delusional? I mean, have people said that to your face? Like,
Yes.
have clerics said it? Have bishops said it?
And worse, of course,
Really? Tell me.
that I'm doing the work of the devil.
Seriously.
Yes.
Who did you hear that from?
Actually, it was a journalist in the, yes, when we were preparing for the conference, the 2001 conference, which was, mentioned in the introduction, brought in huge, the worst form of repression. Because, of course, the Vatican wanted to shut it down and tried everything to shut it down, threatening Sister Joan Chichester,
Joan, yes.
excommunication, and tried everything and remove anyway. But there was a journalist, an Irish journalist, who asked me very seriously, how do you know you're not doing the work of the devil?
How did you answer him?
I said, that's...
I hope it was a him, was it? Could it possibly have been a woman?
It was.
It was a him.
It was. And I said, that's not a journalist's question. That's inquisition.
Yes.
He was way out of his...
completely out of order.
Yes.
Completely out of order.
But I would have got anonymous letters. I've mentioned it in the book. Threats of rape, which are unfortunately common for women who dare to speak up. Yeah, rape, terrible phone calls. We had to take, my name out of the directory. Threats of violence, yes. And at the conference in 2001, we had to get private security, which would
imagine.
We could ill afford, but we had to pay for private security. We were very, obviously, because there'd been threats for the guests, and of course others as well. They were reported to the Gardaí. But letters, anonymous letters, whores, very, you're a whore, you're a prostitute, all the sexual insult. You're a woman of the devil, and also you're a prostitute, you're a whore. But, that's at the root of a lot of the misogyny. It comes up. And sadly, the issue of women like me just want to answer a call that many men have answered, and there's no issue. Just because you're a woman, it brings up the worst in terms of, yes, misogyny and sexism. We are a threat. Well, I realized I was very naive, but if a woman like me, or girl, as I was then, had a calling to priesthood, well, the whole patriarchal structure, the foundation, are like sand.
Yes, and it is.
And
Aren't the parallels with the suffragettes movement so similar? They're so similar. They're so alike. The idea that you would have to, you would have to face police and not just name calling, but threats of violence, and that when I go back and I look at the history of the just simply the desire that women had to be treated as equal citizens and want to vote, it's very hard to explain to young people today just the appalling patriarchal system that owned so much, owned the police, owned the laws, owned the systems, was able to engage all of those to keep women down. And yet women like you back in those days just refused. They just kept bouncing back up again, no matter what was thrown at them. You just keep bouncing back up. And it's that strength. Where on earth did that strength come from? Where did it come from?
Well, I said it's I have to give the credit, as I said, to the one who calls me, who is not giving up.
Do you not give out to him? Do you not give out to God and say, it's about time, you're taking your time. This is way too slow. Could you not nudge those guys in the magisterium?
Well, listen, I was so naive at the beginning. You see, of course, I had that calling in college. I had to survive. So it got behind me, and I got married, and I said, well, that's it. It will come at some stage, but it won't be for me now anyway. But then in 1990, it erupted back with such a strength. And then I knew, and that's when I also realized there are other women, because of course here I am speaking, but I'm not the only one. There are plenty
And
of
have
other
you,
women.
how did you make common cause with other women who felt the passion that you did and the calling that you did?
Well, I found out gradually when you speak out, others say, famous words, me too,
Me too.
me too. So that's it. So, and I'd realized some women, some have died obviously since,
Mm.
because they were older women, and some of them had that calling from childhood. And I'll tell you, when I started a group for the ordination of women, basic, of which you joined, I spoke to a woman who has died since, Delma Sheridan. And I was in tears after listening to her. And that's what prompted me. I said, how many other women are going to go to their graves with their vocation never even surfaced? Because Delma had kept that vocation to herself. We had studied together in the Irish School of Ecumenics. Now, Delma would have been the next generation. She would have been my parents' age. And that's what prompted me. I said, no, seeing Delma's pain and I said, all generations of women will go to their graves with that vocation never acknowledged. So that's what prompted me to start Brothers and Sisters in Christ. And of course, other women joined and other women have spoken and everything. But the penalty for speaking out, for being visible, there is a price to be paid. So if you have a ministry, you cannot, let's face it, you will lose your ministry. If you're lecturing, in a Catholic, you cannot, university, you cannot. People, know that. Eamon McCarthy was 5 years out of ministry as a priest, for supporting. So it has been a very repressive, very punitive, repressive, to these. And now a few more voices now are coming up. And part of the purpose of writing the book, it's a personal story. Of course, it's one woman, it's a personal story, but my hope by writing it is to bring out all those other stories, all those other women, that they would be listened to with respect, and that there would be conversations, so that we would have the courage and the integrity as a church, because let's face it, we have a shortage of truth in our church. And a shortage of courage.
Oh, a big shortage of courage. Let's talk about our own magisterium. I mean, we have, I don't know, many bishops. We have, 30 odd bishops. How many of those have spoken to you quietly, privately, given you any reassurance or encouragement? How many?
I think one would have been more supportive, an auxiliary bishop. He is mentioned in the book, Dermot O'Mahony.
Dermot O'Mahony.
Yeah, but otherwise, no, because
no.
There are, now, a lot of the bishops whom I encountered by now are dead. And as I was writing the books, they were dying. Unfortunately, not by meeting me. But, after a while, I realized, no, they're a product of a system. And the system depends on them to keep going, as I say. And that is it. So that's it. So I'm out. I'm obviously very threatening. They don't know what to do. They wouldn't know what to do with me. Now, I have to say, just last night, by coincidence, sheer coincidence, I was at a book launch, somebody else's book launch, but there was a Bishop Niall Cole, who was just been made Bishop of Raphoe. And he had spoken there. And while he was listening, talking, and the topic was about transformation in the church, I listened to his speech, and I have to say it was like a cold shower. So afterwards, anyway, there was an opportunity was there. And so I said, well, I'll grasp the opportunity. And I told him, I said, the old Irish saying, a bishop always gets a bed, but never the truth. I said, well, you're not going to get a bed from me, but you will get the truth. And I received your talk like a cold shower.
Wow.
And I said, the reality about I shared with him some of the reality. I have to say, I didn't pull my punches. It's in the book. And I said, we're talking about what I've described as spiritual abuse.
Which it is.
Which it is. And as I said, just like the voices of the victims of clerical sexual abuse were not welcome when they started talking about their abuse, I said, well, I know our voices are not welcome. And if you're in the middle of a synodal process, you are going to have to go a bit deeper. Otherwise, we'll end up with a very shallow process and nothing real is going to come out. So I said, yes, disturbing voices, but remember the clerical sexual abuse voices, which you did not want to hear and you tried to block for so long.
And if we remember that, well, in fact, we're still in it. That
Yes.
period, that
Yes.
is not over, though some would
No.
like to think that it is.
Exactly.
But if
Yes.
we look at how that manifested itself, everything we know about that, everything we know about abuse, everything we know about
Yes.
episcopal mismanagement and protection of priests, and the ignoring, and very often worse than that, the demonizing of victims.
Yes. Same.
That all came, we didn't know, the church didn't volunteer any of that.
No.
They volunteered the demonization, but they didn't volunteer the truth. We got that through individuals like those who were abused, who needed such strength, those who supported them,
Yes.
whether it was the lawyers, whether it was the media, and eventually the governments that set up the commissions, not just here, but Canada, Australia, the United States. But none of it was volunteer. Our church, which dares to believe it is of divine, of divine authenticity and instigation, and is the exemplar of the way, the truth, and the life, couldn't bear the truth.
No.
Couldn't bear the truth. Couldn't reveal the truth.
Yeah.
Couldn't bear it. And that's what I'm wondering in its relationship with you, because so often with those who were abused, we see their lives, spiraled into very often bad relationship with alcohol, mental health problems. But that suited the church. That suited the authorities, because they could say, look at these people, they're mentally ill.
Yes.
You can't believe what they say, without making the connection between their illness and its causation.
Yes.
Its causation.
Yeah. And
Did you find that they were able to write you off? Oh, she's a person who had a breakdown, as if
Yes.
that explains everything.
Yeah, and I know, because in 95, you spoke at that seminar in 95. That's when I publicly said that I had a breakdown and that I had taken an overdose and I'd been, in St. Patrick's Psychiatric Hospital. And I remember beforehand, some people, now they were well-intentioned, but they said, do not say that because you will be written off. But I said, no, that is the reality. That is the truth of my story. And if I do not say it, I am not true to my story, but also will perpetuate the stigma which is attached to people who have mental breakdowns. And I said, I will not be part of perpetuating that stigma. But that is the reality. As you say, then people can be easily dismissed as being unbalanced or, psychiatric. But as I say, in 1995, I had made that public. And I said, no, that is part of my story, and I will not erase it to pretend something. No, that is it. But can the church authorities take responsibility? There's a shortage of responsibility as well as truth and courage. And I have said recently there was a bishop. He was, a friend told me she offered him a copy of the book. And he said, yeah, well, he hadn't read it and everything. And then he said, well, it's the ordination of women. Oh, well, that's above my pay grade. Well, then it's above everybody's pay grade. The washing of the hands, so whose responsibility it is? I mean, the role of a bishop, as we know in Vatican II, they're not branch managers. I see a great washing of the hands. Yeah. I see it. Well, we'll wait and see what happens in Rome. No leadership, official positions of leadership, but then no leadership. And I just saw only about a few days ago now that the latest, I don't know how to say it, but for vocations is that there is a monstrance which has been blessed by Pope Leo, and now is being called a vocation monstrance, is going to go around Ireland. Now, 2 years ago, we had a special monstrance, which had been blessed by Pope John Paul II, which went around for vocations. And as I say, what is this about? But
tell me about the consequences.
What does it say about the body of Christ?
Absolutely.
I said, the monstrance. Who has blessed the monstrance? I said, what is more powerful than the body of Christ? We need. I mean, it has reached. It is mind-boggling. That's all I can say. But this is where we're at, and the synodal process is sidelined for. That's it.
Well, of course, the synodal process at its broadest, when it was pushed out to diocesan level, we heard the words right around the world, loud and clear. You're not taking women seriously enough. The church is being hurt by the failure to include. You're wasting both time and resources, but most importantly, the great resource that is the human person, that is woman. You are wasting it. Tell me about, as you look at the church right now, today, with a new pope, what do you see as the consequences of failing to address this issue and to address it away from the vanity of daring to think that this is God's will, that God doesn't want any woman to be a priest? I remember writing that to John Paul whenever we had all that stuff, mulieris dignitatem and all that, patting the head and telling us how lovely we are and what great charism we have, and keep dusting the pulpit, basically, or say worse than that, opening up other little jobs to us. This is the big thing. Open up little jobs, and there are other vocations in the church. But tell me what you think. Tell me what you think is the damage that it has caused to the church. What are the consequences of not listening to voices like yours and not opening the priesthood to women?
Well, there are many things I could say, but what came to me, the word which came to me listening to your question, Mary, was a loss of integrity.
Oh, wow.
That's
interesting.
That's
interesting.
That's a one word which just popped into my head. A loss of integrity. Yes, a loss of integrity. Now I could, expand different aspects.
And whose integrity? I mean, we're talking about
the whole church.
The whole church. And what damage the damage that does to Christ and the credibility of Christ.
Yes, a loss, integrity, wholeness. And it's not just women, because I see those men, the bishops. I mean, I met the nuncio, it's in the book as well, a long time back. But you couldn't envy them. They're trapped in a system. Now they're trapping others as well. But I could not envy them, because there are no winners in a patriarchal structure. It's a distortion of the relationship between men and women. And there's a profound distortion of that relationship, because one ends up one of domination. Well, I mean, both, it's not faithfulness to Christ. It's not faithfulness to the gospel. It cannot be a sign of the liberating gospel of Jesus. So the church is losing, yes, a big part of its integrity, because its connection to that liberating gospel is obscured. That's it. So yes, some would say, well, I'm losing out. At once, that's minor. Well, I'm one person, everything. But the church is losing its integrity. Now, some of us say, at least we can try and keep our integrity. And that's what I've seen, is that, yes, it's painful. It has been painful, but at least I can look at myself in the mirror. And I say, a lot of those men can't.
I remember when the CDF produced, way back in '76, the document Inter Seniores, saying that the church does not consider herself authorized to admit women to priestly ordination. And that was the door being shut, slammed shut, precisely because people were pushing against that door, wanting it to open. And I remember at the time and writing to Pope John Paul subsequently saying, look, I don't believe this stuff. And just to go back to my phrase, I think this is theology. It's fake theology. It's the kind of theology that you create. It's a confection in order that you have something that sounds convincing, but you know perfectly well it's fake. Yes. It's designed to flatter existing prejudice, misogyny, and dress it up as divine authority. And I remember writing to him and saying, I'm sorry, but if what you're telling me is that it is Christ who is not authorizing the ordination of women and that Christ deliberately does not want them ordained, then I have a problem with Christ. And I don't want to have that problem with Christ because it means so much to me to have the relationship with Christ himself and with his story and with his wonderful message, his joy and the thought of redemption and salvation. But if what you're telling me is that he cannot, that he's telling you as Pope and Magisterium, you mustn't ordain them because I don't want it, then I'm saying, is he this great divinity? And there was a dreadful, dreadful time. I remember sleepless nights, tortured by this. Yes. But you know what his answer was? It was extraordinary. Now, he didn't write it himself. It was some flunky wrote it on, allegedly on his behalf, saying that as long as I could accept that this was the church's teaching, I didn't have to accept the teaching, but I could continue within membership of the church as long as I accepted that it was the church's teaching. It was so blessed Jesuitical that I'm kind of ashamed of myself now that I didn't say, oh, baloney, and write back and say, no, I can't do that. But actually, it's exactly what I tried to do. I tried to put it and say, well, that's the way it is.
Yes.
But I do want to stay with the church. But at the same time, nobody was calling me to the vocation, so I didn't have the pressure that you had. I did have the pressure of saying, how am I going? I'm not teaching this stuff to my kids. I can't teach this stuff to my kids. I don't believe it, so I'm not going to teach it. But you, on the other hand, you had the pressure of knowing that door was literally shut right in your face. And how does that impact your relationship with children, with your community? When you walk out and talk to people about your faith in Christ, are you saying to yourself, those who stop my vocation are also stopping the coursing of Christ's grace fully through the church, through the world, never to mind the church.
Yes, and you've put your finger on it. And I knew I could not give witness or bear witness to that Christ who did not want women, who discriminated against women. I would not, and I could not bear witness to that Christ. And yes, to my children, very early on, I said, that's not true.
Yes.
That's not Christ. Now,
the emperor has no clothes.
I'm one, as somebody has said, you're just one little voice, but it's my voice, and I speak.
Very powerful voice.
Well, if it is the truth, it is powerful. The power in any voice is the truth behind it. It doesn't matter what role you have, whether you sit on a throne or on a little footstool. And I think that's what we need to hear, more voices.
Tell me, this new Pope, Pope Leo, who's, I really haven't got him figured yet in any shape or form, but we do know that he, insofar as he's spoken about this subject, it has not been hope-filled, what he has said. He seems to be a person who has in the past indicated, let's say, an opposition to the idea of women in priesthood in the same way that he has to the changing church teaching on homosexuality, for example. what we'll get, it seems to me, from him is more of the nice girl. Here's a little job for you. I'm going to make you Secretary General of this, or I'm going to put you into a little job. I'm going to handpick really good, excellent women for individualized jobs, and then I'm going to say, look at me, how great I am. I'm promoting women. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I never had a calling to an administrative function, so that's one thing out. No, and it's not just for me. I think, and it goes to the core of it. Do we believe in a God, the God of Jesus, who discriminates between men and women? Do we believe our baptism really means that there is no longer male or female? It goes to the core of our belief,
Correct.
of our creed. And that's to go back to where we started, with the Patriarchy Commission. Do we really believe that maleness is essential for salvation? And that is it. So do we really believe that the patriarchal institution of the church is divinely instituted or not?
God forbid.
Exactly.
If I believe that, I would be an atheist.
But it is quite fundamental. But at the root of it is, what kind of a God do we believe in? The God of Jesus Christ. And are women fully in the image of Christ, the image of God? Because ultimately, what it's saying about us as women in a female body is that we are not as much in the image of God as men. So that undermines our own theology of creation and, of course, of salvation.
Tell me.
It undermines our baptism. And I said to one bishop, yes. I wrote to one bishop at one stage, I said, I was not baptized into slavery, into servitude. But remember, Thomas Aquinas had said there are two types of people who could not be ordained, slaves and women.
Women. Mm-hmm.
Because women are in perpetual servitude, the will of God, women are in perpetual servitude to men. Now, we have discarded Thomas Aquinas, but we have kept that because in a patriarchal institution, women are still in servitude. Men make the decisions, women obey.
Tell me about
that has not changed.
No. So it is so strong. I mean, it is a formidable force that we are pitted against. But tell me about the future. Are you hopeful? Are you hopeful?
Yes.
I mean, I think Diarmuid Martin, the former Archbishop of Dublin, who was actually almost a good champion of women in many ways, but at least he pointed out to the church that they didn't include women, that they were, hiding to nothing in the longer term. But he did say in more recent times that there would not be women priests in his lifetime.
Yes. And as I've said, including in the book, I said, I do not know the future. I do not know the length of my life. But all I can do is try to be faithful as long as I live. And also after me, there are other generations. There are other women coming up. I have received from women, you mentioned the suffragettes, I have received from women who fought, who never saw the fruit of their work, and yet they believed. I am grateful for what the women have done before me, including in the church. I will do what I can. When the fruit come, I do not know, but I am sure that it will come. Of that, I have no doubt. I do not know when. I do not know whether I will see it, but I am sure that discrimination will end because it is not from the heart of Christ.
You've plowed a very, very lonely furrow, Selene. Have you felt accompanied always by Christ? Have you felt Christ always with you?
Yes, but sorry, I'm emotional. Often it has been the crucified Christ.
Oh, wow. Selene, you're You're a champion. Absolute champion. God, if only we had priests like you, if the church only had that
But
passion.
Mary, I believe in the resurrection. And that's why I believe in the future.
And we have to, yeah. If we hang around at all, we have to believe in the future. And we have to believe that you can plant the seed today that grows into the oak tree that you may never see, but that you relish the thought with generosity that others will. Others will know its beauty and its shade and its joy. And it will be there because you planted the seed, and you planted it maybe alone, quietly, in
So
solitude.
I've had support. I have a good man beside me.
You have a wonderful husband. We all know Colin, how
Yes,
great he is. Yeah.
and a priest like Eamon McCarthy, who I'm sure is watching from his place, his parish in Wicklow. No, I've had support, I have to say, and a lot of support, including you, Mary, from all those years back, before you were president, and you took a risk very early on when it was unpopular. So I have had support, and obviously people in Root and Branch. So that has kept me going, and good friends. So yeah, I have a lot to be. You see the tears, yes, the crucified Christ, but perhaps the church has always crucified Christ. That's not new.
Nothing new there.
But Christ, he's been crucified in women. There's no doubt about it. But I've had a lot of support from men as well as women, and that's where the hope is really. And I would hope as well that there will be more support, not just for me personally. I've got a lot of support now, but that a lot of women still feel very, very lonely and isolated. So I hope they would get encouragement and know that there is support. And yes, that together, we can be. And I think that we're now into questions, and answers. And I'm sure that there will be some people who will express some of that. But, I just want to end with, gratitude for the support. Yes. And I was going to say from the living and the dead, well, the dead, the one who are in the fullness of life, the communion of saints. I cannot not mention them, because
where would we be without them?
Exactly. And they are called on them. And my beloved Saint Therese of Lisieux,
Yes.
who died again, expressing a calling to priesthood, she would not see.
Yes.
She knew that, but she would help. So I think she's also rooting for us. So I think there is a lot to celebrate and a lot to be hopeful for. And no, I will not go along with, we so say you'll not see it in your lifetime. I say, well, who knows? I could live.
Who knows?
Exactly.
Who knows? It's
I
like
have to
the
say,
walls of Jericho.
I hope to say it. I hope to say
it could come crumbling down before our very eyes.
It could come very quickly. So that's it. So
I often think in that regard, when I'm going through the main gate of Trinity College, and right in front of me is the Campanile, and to the left of it is a statue of George Salmon, who was a provost of Trinity College, very eminent academic at the turn of into the 20th century, who was adamant that the college was then about 300 years old, and over his dead body, he said, would women come in. Over his dead body. Anyway, he died in 1904. And in 1904, the first women entered the college. So it was over his dead body. And I wouldn't give him the dignity of the gift of prophecy, but it's interesting that the point, and I often make it to young women particularly, is we are only in the opening stages. That university had existed for 300 years. Women have been came in 1904 in dribs and drabs and tiny numbers. Now they're there now we've got a provost who's a woman, and wonderful woman. And so times have changed dramatically in so many areas for women, in so many areas. But we have to remind ourselves we're still only in the opening chapters in terms of human history. And unless people do what you've done, stay with it. If you give up, that's what they want. They're delighted when we give up.
Yes,
The number
yes.
of people who would love for me to go and embrace a different church, and the same with you. I'm sure you've been told 100 times, go and join another church. They love it. But we can't give them that because the authenticity and the integrity of what we believe in makes us stand, as Seamus Heaney says, stand our ground. Stand our ground in faith. I'm going to just suggest maybe to Mary, the other one of the other Marys, maybe that we have exhausted you, Selene, but it would be wonderful if we could take some questions from the wonderful people who've been listening. It's just been so moving to hear you, Selene. So just, yeah, I feel just full of that intensity and passion, and I'm delighted to have it because there are days when it ain't there.
Thank you
We all
so
need
much.
them. We all need.
It's words fail me. You're quite right, Mary. We must open the floor. We're going to open the floor. There may be many people wanting to share and to ask counsel. So the usual folk, I see hands up already, the yellow hands. It's the usual routine, please, everybody. Put up your yellow hand. There will be an order, I hope, that I see in front of me. One or two of us are also looking out. It may be possible to spot those of you who want to raise a physical hand, but we are a lot of people here tonight, and your safest really is to find your yellow hand button. Without further ado, Penelope Middlebow, you were first. Come on in.
Oh, hi, Penny. How are you?
Hi, how lovely.
Lovely
Lovely
to
to
see
see you
you.
both. I'll be very quick because I'm sure everyone's got lots of questions. Selene, you know I loved your book. And also just to bear in mind when the Berlin Wall came down, then so did a whole lot of totalitarian dictators in Eastern Europe. So it could happen really quickly. It will happen. We've got to get it to happen in your lifetime. But tell us what you think a priest is.
Well, we should really be kind of perhaps more precise on, say, presbyteral ministry and
Yes, presbyter.
yeah, but if I say sometimes presbyteral ministry, people look at me like, what is she talking about? So yeah, because of course it's reclaiming, part of it is reclaiming, at baptism that we are priests through our baptism. For me also, it's getting rid of a lot of the clericalism and a separate caste. Sometimes I've often said I've had a vocation to that ministry, but I don't think I've had a vocation to being a member of a clerical in group. In fact, I was sure, of that really. So I think a lot of it have to go, but at the heart of all I can say about my own calling has been very strong. That's why I couldn't be shunted into other places. And while I taught for a while, having the Ministry of Spiritual Direction, which I really have found very fulfilling, I have to say. But at the heart of my own vocation, certainly presiding at Eucharist has been very, very, I cannot explain very much words, but I find an expression of my deepest vocation in that. And of course, the word, ministry of the word, but also rely, one thing which is not known is that unless you're a priest, you cannot give the last rite. You cannot give the anointing of the sick. And I have a very good friend, an old friend in all senses of the word, was just asked me about 2 weeks ago. She's now in a nursing home. She has had to fill in her care plan, who to call in case, that she starts dying, the dying process. And she said, Selene, can I put your name down to give me the last rites? She said, we have journeyed together for decades. She has been a great support to me. And she said, I don't want a priest whom I don't know, who doesn't know me, just to come. So I said, yes, but this is in canon law, this is reserved to priests. So we have a lot of women chaplains in hospitals who cannot give we are a sacramental church, we believe in sacraments, and yet they cannot give the sacrament of the sick, the anointing of the sick. So that's one case. Or chaplains in schools or in prisons who cannot hear confessions officially. Of course, we hear them all the time. And we do, women do, but officially. So it's tying the hands. For whose benefit is it? Tying the hands of ministers, because they're female or because they're married. So that's another dimension, the mandatory celibacy as well. I think the system we have is inherited from Trent, a particular model of church, 7 years in a seminary, shut away, everything. I think a lot has to go, and the community, the people of priests baptized, has to bring up their leaders for different ministries, and a much more diverse groups of ministry, because that's it. So I see quite a lot of change, but for me, what I can say, the Eucharist is very much at the heart of it. But it's not that the presbyter does the magic. I mean, we call on the Spirit. Let your Spirit, and it's a whole. Everybody celebrates together. The community celebrates together. Together, we call on the Spirit. That's it. So, I think we.
Thank you.
That's it.
I hate to cut you off, but we have
right.
a queue
starting
to form around the block.
But that might explain for other people as well. Yeah.
Thank you. May we come swiftly to Hilda Geraghty. Hilda, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, thank you, Selene, for that wonderful witness, and congratulations on your book. I think telling your story is the most powerful thing you can do. As you were speaking, I was thinking that our struggle is not just against the magisterium and the Vatican. The fact is that at the moment, most of the church is actually located in the southern hemisphere. Most Catholics are now down south. And if the church were only in Western Europe, in Western society, I think we'd have a much better chance. At the moment, I think the church is really seriously afraid that if they do say, okay, women priests, that they will really have a schism on their hands, because misogyny is deeply entrenched in the church, because it is in the world. And I'm thinking that your struggle to become a priest is obviously our struggle, I should say, to become priests. It is deeply linked to the evolution of the world, which has to move in the direction. I see the evolution of the human species at the moment as the evolution of women, and women being allowed to play their role in the church and in the world.
I think I must ask you to.
Would you agree that you're on the cusp of a wave of a world-wide struggle for equality?
Thank you,
beginning
Hilda.
with the church.
Yes, I think Mary, you might also reply as well, Mary.
Confusion of Mary's. Dr. Mary.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point that I was trying to make for women generally, is that the evolution of women's liberation and women's rights and women entering professions that were denied to them, including the priesthood, but medicine and law and all sorts. We are still in what to me appears to be the opening chapters. Most of these dynamics are a century old, at most a century old, and we've been. We're a kind of a lucky generation in many ways, living in a Western world where we have begun to really feel the momentum and power of women, where it is given its head, whether it's in politics, whether it's in law, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in teaching, all of the things that in the past women were regarded as being inadequate to those tasks. Now we see the nonsense of that, the sheer patriarchal misogyny, actually some of it verging on hatred, because we're feeling there's a pushback against the openness to women in the world, and it smacks very often of hatred. And so it seems to me that the priesthood, the issue of women in priesthood, is the arguments that are made are exactly the same kind of arguments: why they couldn't be doctors, why they couldn't be lawyers, why the why you can't brigade. And so it's just another wall that has to come down. But you're right that the church stretched across 5 continents, doing very numerically growing strong in Africa and Asia. In areas where that the openness to the fullness of women's talents is still behind the curve.
Thank you, Helga.
Then I think, but that makes it all the more important why people like Selene stand their ground.
Thank you so much. Helen, if I may ask you to unmute, and Helen Desforges, please come in, but keep your question as pointed and short as you possibly can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for all this. One thing I am very interested in, or something which helps me find my way, is to go back to the origins of the church, and to go back to Jesus, Mary Magdalene, St. Paul, and all the others. And in the first 200 years of the church, women were equal to men. And I remember the lady, I can't remember her name now, in that Bristol conferences we had, and what was her name? And she was looking at early statues and representations of
Dr. Ali Katouche.
Yes, and
Dr.
she was
Ali
looking at
Katouche.
those. Yeah, she was looking in catacombs. She was looking all over the place, and she was finding images of women who were behaving and dressed as clerics, as bishops, as not as the bishops we know now. And then that all collapsed after, I'm trying to think which was it. That collapsed in about the 3rd or 4th century, when you got the imposition of the Roman Church, the Roman Catholic Church. And so I look back to those first 200 years, and I am reassured by it. And I don't know why we had this massive schism between the earliest church, the first 200 years, and then the subsequent church, which did women down and wouldn't allow women, like you've been saying all along, to have a place in the church.
Thank you, Helen. I don't know which of you would like to pick that up. I could throw in very quickly that we had an excellent talk on this very sudden change in the early church by John Rosebank and Penelope Middlebow.
Yes, I saw it.
Just spoken.
Yes,
and I deeply encourage anyone to go back and have a really good listen to that on our website to get the historical background.
If they go to the History Cafe, then they will get the whole thing.
Absolutely.
There. And it's so detailed. And I'm so despondent that we've had this huge gap on why it occurred. And it shouldn't have occurred, but it did.
I don't know if Selene or Mary, you want to comment?
Well, I'm not an expert on that ground. It seems to me when power, the very early disciples were, quite countercultural to some extent. But when it became, associated with power and the religion of the state, well, that is it. It took on the patriarchal culture. And
absolutely. And that's so disheartens me that.
It may come again. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Suzanne, delighted to have you with us. Come on in.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that I think we should congratulate ourselves that this chat list, the chatting, has been the most chatting I've ever seen on any Zoom call. So I'll start out with that. My question's more to you, Mary. I agree that this is a women's rights movement, a suffrage, type of movement. Do you have any suggestions, or what would you say were the next concrete steps that we need to take? In one of my chats, my little rants, I made a comment that we've been whining, which maybe was a sort of a strong word, but we've been whining about this for years and years. What are we going to all do about it? So my question is, do you have any clear, concrete steps that we should take? And yes, I am a Roman Catholic woman, bishop, matter of fact, not just a priest. I may look clerical, but I'm probably the most unclerical or less person you can meet. But what would you suggest? We're on call and we preach to ourselves over and over again on all different kinds of organizations. Catholic groups everywhere. What do we do next?
I think we keep on pushing, we keep on meeting the arguments, we keep on dismissing the arguments that are being made against us. We attack them back. We disclose that there are many, many now excellent academics in this field who are able to take on the so-called theology, which is, in my view, a very fake theology. That's one area of attack, mainly because it's like a scalpel in a way, because if we're in a situation so often where we're being told, sorry, but this is the divine will. Now, if it's God that's authorizing it, like really, if we're up against God, we're in real trouble. But then, as Selene makes the point very strongly, actually, it's the opposite. We firmly believe that God is on our side. So I think that we tackle them with the kind of story. The publication of Selene's book is one of the great attacks on fake theology. Theologians, not just female theologians, but many, many liberal theologians now, we really need them. We need them to double down on this, so that whenever we get, take a simple example, we had a document that was produced by our synodal office here in Ireland called Baptized and Sent. Now, I immediately, when I read the document, I thought, oh God, this is grim stuff, really. This is not what I had hoped for coming out of the synod process. It was it was like triple diluted. And also I thought it was theologically, some of it just did not gel with me. So when I wrote to them, of course, I didn't get a reply, but setting out the arguments that I felt that they had missed. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to be challengers. So again, when you're asked to do something, let your local priest, let your local bishop know. When they talk, as very often is the case, you gave the example of the cold shower. How many make speeches and never hear that said to them? Never hear it said to them that their words actually, that they probably spent 2 days, drafting, or maybe even a week, that they were less than good. And we expect better. So I think we find our voices, to be honest, in 1,000 ways, in 1 million. There are 600 million of us with voices, and we need to let them know. We need to let them know, and the men who also believe in this cause need to let them know. It's just that simple.
That is telling us. I hope we'll, Suzanne, I'm sure you're using your voice all the time.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, but thank you. I mean, we just have to keep at it, like you said.
Yeah, my mother believed in the power of nagging, Suzanne, and it seemed to work for her.
Well, it's today's gospel, the Syrophoenician woman.
Well spotted. Well spotted, Selene.
I said this is a brilliant gospel for today.
Yeah.
If Jesus could have his mind changed by a woman, it could happen to a bishop and it could happen to a pope.
Sooner rather than later, let's hope.
Martin, will you bring in John Glynn, please? John, unmute yourself, lovely. Welcome to Papua New Guinea early in the morning. Lord. You are with us, John. You must unmute, my lovely. Yes.
Okay, there we are. I'm terribly shocked. When Selene mentioned, when you mentioned that prayer, asking God not to call you because his church doesn't want you, I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. I was absolutely shocked, because I've experienced that myself. I'm not going into it, but I am forced to ask. It's something I'm trying to write about at the moment. I'm forced to ask, are we all still Catholics?
Yes, John, it's true. You're so right.
I am a priest, and I'm a diocesan priest, not a religious. And my priesthood is is based on the community to which I belong, which is the community that I serve, which is the people all around me. Now, the thing about it is, we're all sinners, okay? We need each other's recognition. We need each other's acceptance. We need each other's forgiveness. We need each other's willingness to hold us up and support us, and on and on and on. I want to belong to a church that is just like me, a church that knows it is sinful, a church that knows that it needs my understanding, my readiness to forgive, my readiness insofar as I can to provide healing and so on. But unfortunately, I belong to a church that says, as a member of this church, you have no rights. Justice will be administered by your superiors, by those who know so much more than you do, who are in fact so much closer to God. And I'm sorry. I find it very difficult to talk about all these things, but that for me is the priesthood. My priesthood is my relationship with my community. I say Mass on Sunday mornings, and I preach, and that is the highlight of my week. That is the highlight of my week. When I am there with the people of my parish, the people to whom I belong, and amongst whom I have lived for 25, 26 years now. And that's my priesthood. I'm sorry, I've gone on too long.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Selene. Thank you,
Well said,
Mary.
John.
God bless the work.
Thank you,
And
John.
you asked the question, John, that I'm always asked, particularly by young people and particularly by my own children, why do you bother? Why do you stay? It's not attractive to them, precisely because it excludes, and because the image of Christ that you and I want fervently to be authentic and embracing and loving, they're not seeing that, they're not hearing it. Imagine that the last big words they heard from Rome were that, that women priests would rupture the nuptial meaning, if they even understood it, rupture the nuptial meaning of salvation. What the heck? I mean, who came up with that stuff? Who came up with it? What genius has a life that is so limited and an intellect that is so dim that they could construct that rubbish and pump it out to us, in the mouth of Christmas? The worst Christmas gift I ever got, reading that rubbish. And then you have our kids who say, why do you bother? Don't let it get to you. Walk away, as so many do. We don't want to walk away. We believe there's something more powerful that can be retrieved and perhaps sown in the soil of the future.
Sometimes I wonder, what do I believe? And I end up by thinking, well, I believe in two things. I believe in God, and I believe in the gospel.
There you go. That's a good start.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much. I must move on to Catherine Salmon. Catherine, unmute, my love, and come on in.
Thank you so much, Selene, for sharing your wonderful story, which I know well, as we've journeyed together for pretty much nearly 30 years. Selene's story sustained me when I faced the penalty of excommunication. And I wonder what you do with the anger that sometimes we all feel with the church in the face of the intransigence, because you always strike me as somebody who's always managed to pray. And I just wonder if you could share, how do you do that in the face of what the church does and continues to do? Thank you.
How do I manage to pray? Well, as I'm not going to say anything original, the Spirit prays in me. I depend on the Spirit to pray within me. And, sometimes I, of course, have no words or no thoughts. It's just my breath, really, my heartbeat. That's all. I don't have a great prayer life, as that I could describe or anything. It's just very often it's keeping one foot in front of the other. And yes, that is it. Yeah, I depend. I suppose I depend on, as I said, the communion of saints, the sustenance of my friends. I depend on the prayers of a lot of other people, and I am very grateful to all those who have told me in advance of this evening that they were praying for us, for all of us this evening. So I'm always grateful for all the prayers, and I know I'm sustained by the prayer of others. I believe that prayer transcends time and space. I believe I depend on the prayers of people who lived a long time ago. And that's a wonderful thing about the communion of saints. I believe my mother died when I was a child, but I believe in her continued care and support for me. And our prayers and our faith, as I said, I mentioned, you know, our faith, my mother's faith sustains me. So prayer, yeah, I've no big thing to say about it. It's who I am, but the spirit within us prays, and for each other. Very important to pray for each other and to tell each other we pray for each other. As you do, thank you. And you often do for me in Knock. I have to say, people who have read the book will know that I got a very special blessing for my vocation in Knock, of all places. So, yes. So, and you, Catherine. So, yes. So, yes, I'm also, you know, very often people have said, well, you know, be like Mary. Mary wasn't a priest, and they have used and abused Mary to actually tell women that we don't have a calling to priesthood. But Mary has been with me at every step. At every step. Christ, yes, with me, but Mary also at every step. So I also depend very much on prayers. And your prayers. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you,
Bless
Selene.
you, and thank you for sharing your love of Our Lady of Knock with me.
Wonderful. I'm going to invite Nolene to unmute and come in, but before she gives her question or her point, I'm just going to point out that we have already run past our finishing time. From the fact that virtually no one has left, I think we will stay on and hope to get yourself, Nolene, and the next three questioners in. And if we may ask you to be brief, each of yourself and the next three people, it would help us enormously. Welcome, Nolene.
Thank you very much. First time I've listened to it. I just want to give you an example. Recently, I went to a school reunion centenary. Being a teacher in a Catholic school in rural New Zealand has been most of my experience. I went to this reunion. There was a foreign priest speaking. Everyone in the church didn't have a chance to be included in any part of the ceremony. Priest voice the whole time, and unity for welcoming my parents into New Zealand. And I was just ignored completely. I put up my hand, stood in the aisle. And I thought, well, there's no place for women to speak in this church, obviously. So I travelled a long way to go there to thank that community, the whole community, not just the priest or to speak to him. And it just totally not belong, not contributed.
Nolene, you're cutting in and out. We've only not heard everything. Can you just give us your point?
The point is, I've been part of the church all my life. I went back to the centenary. And there was no opportunity for the women who are taught in that school to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think many people, especially women, experience that, as you say, nothing to contribute, told, that's it.
Mm.
It's a form of exclusion, being second class, you know, that's that's also very often what has been expressed. In other words, second class within your own church.
But also what a waste. What a waste
Of
of
course.
talent and energy and love and goodness and generosity. What a waste. Just, all dammed up and dying to get across the dam and not allowed. It seems such a waste, such a waste.
It's abusive.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Thank you, Nolene. A point well made. Pat, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know where I'm going with this really. I feel really emotional. Selene, I hear what you say about sacraments, but I think maybe they can take other forms. And to me, you are a priest, you're our priest, and you guide and inspire us, and we are your community. I hope others agree with me, but maybe I don't know. And you made me think about 2001 in Dublin, because I think that's the time in my life when I most powerfully felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. In fact, I've never felt it in church, but I did feel it there. And Hans Weingart said, the seed must die for the plant to grow. And you talked about that. And at that point, I phoned Mara Paul and she said she was coming in. I mean, it was so emotional. People were banned, but to me, it exposed the fault line in the institutional theology. And I think we've just grown from that moment on. And I think that the Spirit reaches parts that clerics can't reach. And for Bishop Suzanne, I just wanted to say, I think we've been emboldened ever since, and we are bolder, and we do speak out more, and we speak out with more courage. And it's all because of people like you, Selene. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Pat. May I add that not only we speak, but we act.
We do.
As well.
Thank you, Pat. Beautiful words. Suzanne, unmute and come in, please.
Thank you. So as someone who's carried a call for probably 40 years toward a sacrament with no clue what container it can go in, the challenge for me in gratitude that it just may be that I'm not called to the priesthood as we know it, or oh, did you not hear me? I'm sorry.
No, we can hear you.
Hearing. It's okay.
We hear you.
We hear you.
Okay. So finding a theology out of which to live when there is no form, no role within our church, to do this for me has been a huge challenge. I'm almost 80 years old. And I just left the parish where I've ministered for probably 35 years because it's headed back to 1952. And the foreign-born priest who is there is threatened because I carry a theological education. So I've chosen now, for my own well-being, to leave that community. So I've been struggling to live into what Ronner calls the liturgy of the world. Ronner most of the time is beyond me, I will admit to that. But I guess what I would ask is, in the absence of a container, into what theology do you live as a way of engaging priesthood as maybe something that is bigger, wider than we currently observe it to be?
I think experience precedes theology. And I think the challenge I realized was to live without having that support. It's a bit like walking on water, but then do you remember when Jesus called Peter? Peter stepped out of the boat And he was doing well until he started realizing that there was nothing underneath, and he sank. If he had kept his eyes on Christ, when he was keeping his eyes on Christ, he too could walk on water. And I know, because at times, you know, and it's been made public, I started presiding at Eucharist, and it was made public, and again, by what theology, and how can I justify, etc., etc. And then I realized I would start sinking. But I said, if I keep my eyes on Christ, then somehow I have the surest foundation. And then I can walk on water, so to speak, without having this theological underpinning. Because, as I say, theology is reflection really on experience. Mm-hmm. That's the way it came. The early disciples had an experience, a lived experience, and out of it then theology. And of course, ongoing theology evolves and grows. And some of us, not by choice, I would have much preferred to have it all nicely defined and stay, but that was the call, is to go beyond and to start, I suppose that's it, living by faith and trusting that I could be sustained, and then the theology would come. And yes, one makes mistakes, one takes risks, but that's part of it, and it's not the end of the world, you know, that's it. So, but it is a challenge and it is an adventure. But if you look back at the history of the church, that has always happened. I'm thinking of St. Clare of Assisi. She had been told, now, you know, I think 12th century, she had been told she had been told by the church, that's it. There were all the religious orders, already so many religious orders. If any woman had a vocation to religious order, she could join one of the existing one. They thought, of course, that God had done everything by the 12th century. Clare of Assisi comes, she has a different vocation, which doesn't fit into the present female vocations. She went with that. And the Pope tried, and she said to the Pope, you can absolve me of my sins. You cannot absolve me of my vocation. Her rule, on her deathbed, she got approval for her rule. So she had to live her life trusting, as I say, walking on water, trusting that her vocation was new to the church. And of course we know. And we look back and I say, how could they think they had it all closed and that there would be no more religious orders, no new religious orders after the 12th century? Well, we are also in a period where new things are happening. The theology will follow. We have to walk on water. And we might get wet now and then. But that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you. Amy Elmer, I'm bringing you in really quickly. Please unmute. And please, folks, I see we now have 2 more behind you. Will we please be brief?
That applies to me.
Hi. Thank you so much. Hi, Selene, Dr. Mary. Can't believe I'm talking to you on Zoom. This is so cool. Can I ask, Selene, what did it feel like when you knew God was calling you?
What did it feel like? Well, as I tried to describe it, I said it was very disturbing. You know, it was very disturbing. I mean, I was an 18-year-old Catholic. I'm talking back in the mid-70s. I'd never heard of women called to priesthood. I knew nothing about it. We were quite isolated, and in Ireland, the first woman ordained was in the Presbyterian Church, and that was only in 1976. But as a Roman Catholic woman, this was completely, as I said, blew my mind, and there was no support. There was no internet, no nothing. So it was very disturbing. But, you know, we look back at the Annunciation, and it skips very quickly, but the first word of, you know, very quickly, the angel says to Mary, do not be afraid, because obviously Mary was, there was a sign, what, so it was disturbing, and especially, as I say, in the context of the time, which was going back, that's it. When it came back very strongly in 1990, it was very disturbing as well. But then I had more, then I said yes.
Yeah.
But I have to say, and then the joy, that calling, as said, yes, Christ crucified, yes. But in that calling, as the angel said, do not be afraid.
Do not be
But the
afraid.
first word was, rejoice, Mary. Hey, we say Hail Mary. It's actually rejoice, Mary. And that is at the root of my calling, and I've never forgotten it. And I'm sure Mary at the foot of the cross, Christ crucified, but rejoice, Mary.
Yeah, she knew. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Selene. Alexina, in you come. Unmute, please, and be very brief.
I am unmuted. Can you hear
You
me?
are. You're crystal clear.
There's one phrase that has not come up in this wonderful discussion, which is we are church. This is the theology of women's community. And I have put my trust in it, and it hasn't let me down yet. And I want to pick up what John Glynn said, that he relies on his community. I rely on my community, and he relies on the gospel, and I rely on the gospel. And I trust theology, as Selene has talked about it, as reflection on experience. And we are living in our historical moment, which is not the moment that was Constantine's. It was the moment that was Peter's, when he was invited to walk on water. I do feel full of joy, even when the Pope speaks, and even when you are at a meeting and there's no opportunity for you to speak. So I'm thinking of those 600 million women who are members of the church baptized and hoping to hear their voices.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Alexina. Beautiful. John O'Loughlin Kennedy, what a joy to end with you.
Hello.
Hello, Lockie.
I have been, there's something that I have to, I love Mary McAtee's using the word podology to cover theology. I have asked myself, and I ask you all, is theology the only academic subject on which you are allowed to come up with absolute nonsense in a conclusion and not be sent back to check your premises or the line of our argument? And that goes back with me to St. Augustine, who managed to arrive at the conclusion that millions and millions of babies who were born before they could be baptized, well, apparently he couldn't say they were going to hell, so they invented the new place called limbo. But then, fortunately, limbo was never defined by the earthly church. It was a notion, an idea. It was actually produced to solve a problem
of their own making.
We were encouraged to pray for the dead. But what was the use of praying for the dead if the dead were already in heaven? And it was certainly no use praying for the dead if they were already in the other place. And so the mistake there was that they were confusing the timeline of a finite world with the infinite world, which doesn't have a timeline. Time was invented to as part of the time, space, energy, material mystery. And so, from my personal experience, I'm not a great prayer person, but one prayer of mine at least was answered before I ever got around to saying it. And and that is my personal experience, and it carries no weight. But at least I'm certain that the next world doesn't have a time link to the present world. And theologians should take account of that. And my final word will be that there is a retired bishop whom I won't identify, who has made the comment that the imposition of a mitre causes irreversible brain damage.
And on that note,
yeah, so let's take the human side of things as the human side of things, and not take them too seriously.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rocky.
Delighted to hand over to Mary Varley for the almost impossible task of thanking Selene and Mary. All yours, Mary Varley.
That's true, Mary. I'm going to keep this really brief. Selene and Mary, we have been truly blessed by your conversation this evening. And the chat is, when you read it, you'll see it's overflowing with words like wonderful, courageous, heartfelt, honest, inspiring, leaders. And I think that says it all. So our heartfelt and our deep thanks to both of you this evening for sharing with us with such dignity and courage, and the courage to be, both of you in different ways, so true to yourselves. Thank you. I also want to say a huge thank you to the many people who've spoken here as well this evening. You've spoken movingly. Thank you to all those courageous women who are living your vocation as priests, whether you're ordained or not. And thank you for sharing your hurt, your pain and determination too. Thank you. And now I'm going to hand over to Mary Varley, and that's me, and Mary Ring, to just say very briefly one or two things that we've got coming up. So Mary, do you want to start, please, Kevin? We've got a quick slide or two.
I will, with great pleasure. So, everybody, dear friends, this is your opportunity. Root and Branch cannot continue to offer fabulous evenings like the one we've just enjoyed unless we have your financial support. This is your opportunity. If we want to carry on with evenings like this, mornings like this, meetings like this, I must firstly thank everybody who has responded so swiftly and generously to the appeal that we launched last week. You can see it on the screen, dear friends. We wish that we could survive on our volunteer time. We've got any amount of that. But we need technology. We need Zoom, videos, editing, websites, newsletters, outreach. and sadly, they must be paid for. Are these meetings worth a cup of coffee to you? The price of a cup of coffee, or maybe a little bit more? For Root and Branch to keep going and our opportunity to build and to grow, we would be, if we can count on regular income from you, however modest, we will be able to carry on like this. You could help in this. You could be part of this. You are part of this. I won't keep you any longer, just to say that at the foot of every page of our website, there's a donate button, which will lead you to all the information that you can need to carry on being a part of what we have had this evening. Thank you so much. Mary Varley, back to you, dear.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Could you put the next slide on? And this is what's coming next. Another hugely courageous woman, Anne-Marie Allen, is going to talk about her experience as an assistant numerary in Opus Dei. And when you've heard Michelle and Anne-Marie's conversation, I wonder whether you'll actually want to write, because people have said that there is a charism in Opus Dei. Well, when you've heard this, you can decide what charism, if any, you discern. So, 12th of March, 8 o'clock. See you then. Thank you. And then finally, in March, thinking about Easter and thinking about the time that Jesus got together with all his mates the night before he was crucified, we're going to have an evening of reflection on friendship through music, words and poetry. There'll be no need to register. We just want you to turn up through the link on the website, and we hope to see you there. Thank you. And now I think I'm going to hand over for Kevin for the final prayer, especially requested by Selene.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mary. I'll just bring up the slide. I myself will dream a dream within you. Good dreams come from me, you know. My dreams seem impossible. Not too practical, not for the cautious man or woman. A little risky, perhaps, a trifle brash, perhaps. Some of my friends prefer to rest more comfortably in sounder sleep with visionless eyes. But from those who share my dreams, I ask a little more patience, a little humour, some small courage, and a listening heart, and I will do the rest. Then they will risk and wonder at their daring. Run and marvel at their speed, build and stand in awe at the beauty of their building. You will meet me often as you work, and your companions who share the risk, and your friends who believe in you enough to lend their own hands, their own hearts to your building. And the people who will stand in your doorway, stay a while and walk away, knowing that they too can find a dream. There will be sun-filled days, and sometimes it will rain. A little variety, both come from me. So come now, be content. It is my dream you dream, my house you build, my caring you witness, my love you share. And this is the heart of the matter. And thank you all.